In the heart of New York City, where fortunes are made and lost in a single beat, a deal worth hundreds of millions of dollars was about to collapse. Inside the exclusive Aurelia restaurant, billionaire CEO Julian Croft was trapped in a nightmare of silence. His Japanese investors remained impassive, his translator had disappeared, and his empire was on the verge of a linguistic precipice. But a few feet away, clearing their table, was a young waitress named Emily Vance. They saw a simple employee in a black apron. They had no idea they were looking at their last and only hope. What she did next wasn't just about saving a deal. It was about to expose a secret that would change all their lives forever. The air in Aurelia's private dining room was denser than the velvet curtains that insulated it from the rest of Manhattan. It was a suffocating mix of expensive cologne, stale cigar smoke, and pure, unbridled panic. At the head of the polished mahogany table sat Julian Croft, founder and CEO of Croftus, a man whose face was a permanent fixture on the covers of business magazines. Yet, that night, that famously confident face was a mask of tightly controlled dread. The knot in his stomach felt tighter than the Windsor knot of his silk tie. Facing him were Mr. Kenji Tanaka and his two executives from Tanaka Radix, a powerful conglomerate from Tokyo. They were the key. The deal on the table, a joint venture to integrate Croft's revolutionary artificial intelligence software into Tanaka's next generation of robotics, was initially worth $900 million, with the potential to grow to tens of billions. It was the kind of deal that not only forged a career, but created a legacy, and it was slipping through his hands like fine sand. The reason was simple, but catastrophic. David Chen, the world-class translator Julian had hired for a small fortune, had disappeared. He was gone. He had vanished. An hour ago, a frantic message had arrived. Family emergency. Unavoidable. So sorry. Julian's blood ran cold. He had a team of vice presidents, strategists, and lawyers sitting behind him, all educated in the AI League, all earning seven figures, and not a single one of them could articulate more than a konnichiwa. Perhaps, Mr. Tanaka, he said with his precise English, but with a strong accent, we should reschedule, Mr. Croft. This is a matter of great detail. Precision is essential. The word reschedule was a death sentence. Tanaka was returning to Tokyo in the morning. Rescheduling meant a loss of momentum, a sign of incompetence. It meant his biggest competitor, a corporate shark named Marcus Bance, would have time to swoop in and steal the deal. Julian had already heard rumors that Bance was courting the Tanaka team. This meeting was his only chance. No way, Mr. Tanaka, Julian said, his smooth, practiced voice not betraying the frantic scream in his mind. David is simply caught in an unavoidable delay, a small traffic incident. He'll be here any moment. Meanwhile, please enjoy the meal. It's the best in the city. It was a pathetic lie, and everyone knew it. The almost imperceptible tightening around Tanaka's eyes confirmed it. The Japanese delegation valued honor and efficiency above all else. Such a basic failure was a deep insult. Julian's senior vice president, Gerald, leaned in and whispered, Julian, we're dead in the water. We can't discuss intellectual property clauses without a translator. We should cut our losses. Shut up, Gerald, Julian hissed, a thin layer of sweat forming on his forehead. It was in this suffocating silence that Emily Vance moved through the room. To Julian and his entourage, she was invisible, a functional part of the scenery, like the crystal water glasses or the silver cutlery. She moved with an economy of motion that spoke of years of practice, refilling water glasses soundlessly, clearing plates with silent grace. Her uniform was immaculate, her light brown hair was pulled back in a severe bun, and her face was a polite, neutral mask. But behind that mask, Emily was a universe of observation. She didn't just hear the silence, she understood its weight. She saw the forced smile on the billionaire's face and the cold disappointment in the eyes of his guests. She didn't utter a word in English to them, simply nodding and gesturing as needed. When she reached Tanaka's empty plate, he murmured a quiet, reflexive, arigato, without looking at her. Emily paused for a fraction of a second, her fingers hovering over the porcelain. She met his gaze for a fleeting instant and replied in a low, soft voice, almost a whisper, Doitashimashite. You're welcome. Tanaka's eyes widened slightly, a flash of surprise breaking his stoic demeanor. He looked at her, truly looked at her for the first time, but the moment passed. She was just a waitress. Emily retreated to the corner of the room, her heart beating a little faster. She hadn't meant to speak, but the Japanese word had slipped out, a vestige of a life she had been forced to leave behind. She watched as the tableau of despair continued. Julian Croft was now attempting to use a translation app on his phone. The robotic voice shredded the complex technical terms into a nonsensical word salad. The Japanese executives exchanged glances that communicated a mixture of pity and disdain. Emily felt a prick of something she hadn't felt in years, a combination of frustration and opportunity. She knew this language. She knew its nuances, its honorifics, its soul. She had spent 5 years of her life mastering it, not in a classroom, but through total immersion, living in a small town outside Kyoto. It was part of a life where she wasn't Emily the waitress, but Emily, the academic, the linguist, the person who should have been a diplomatic attaché by now. But life has a cruel way of rewriting destinies. A devastating illness had affected her mother, and the mountain of medical bills had crushed her dreams, forcing her to abandon her prestigious international studies program at Georgetown and take any job that paid the bills. Now her world was confined to the four walls of this restaurant, serving men like Julian Croft, men who would never know that the person serving him water could bridge the very gap that was about to cost them $1 billion. The deal was collapsing, and she was the only person in the room who held the key. The question was, would she dare to use it? The atmosphere in the room had soured from tense to feral. Julian Croft's translation app had just committed a fatal error, mistranslating proprietary software safeguards into something that sounded alarmingly like imprisoned computer sorcery. The youngest of Tanaka's aides had to physically suppress a laugh, coughing into his napkin, a catastrophic breach of etiquette that signaled the end. The deal was not just dying, it was being publicly humiliated. Mr. Tanaka placed his chopsticks down with a final delicacy. The sound, a faint clinking of wood on porcelain, resonated like a gunshot in the silent room. "Mr. Croft," he began, his voice devoid of warmth, "I appreciate your hospitality. However, it seems we have reached a stalemate. Without clear and precise communication, we cannot proceed. It would be imprudent." This was the end, the final nail. Julian felt a wave of nausea. He saw his company's stock price plummet. He saw Marcus Bantz laughing on the golf course. He saw his legacy turn to dust. He was about to concede, to offer a final humiliating apology, when a soft voice cut the tension. "Forgive my impertinence, sir." All heads in the room turned toward the source. It was the waitress, Emily. She was standing near the service door, her hands respectfully clasped in front of her. She hadn't shouted. She had spoken just loud enough to be heard, her voice clear and firm. Julian's vice president, Gerald, snorted audibly. "What is this? Get back to the kitchen." Julian was about to dismiss her with a dismissive gesture, furious at the interruption, but he was stopped by Mr. Tanaka. The Japanese executive was no longer looking at Julian. His gaze was fixed on Emily with an expression of intense curiosity on his face. He remembered her, the waitress who had responded in perfect, unaccented Japanese. "Do you have something to say, young lady?" Tanaka asked, his English direct and sharp. Emily took a deep breath, her heart pounding against her ribs. Every instinct screamed at her to retreat, to apologize, and disappear. This was not her world. These were titans of industry, and she was a nobody, with a tray and an apron. But then she caught a glimpse of her own reflection in the mirrored wall. The tired eyes, the monotonous uniform, and a fire ignited within her. This was her chance. Not just to save their deal, but to save herself from this life of invisibility. She addressed Mr. Tanaka directly, but spoke in Japanese. Her words were not the hesitant phrases of a beginner. They were fluid, respectful, and complex, using the formal Kigo style of speech reserved for esteemed superiors. "Tanaka-sama," she began, inclining her head slightly. "Never would I. Forgive me, Mr. Tanaka, but it seems your discussion has reached a stalemate. It pains me to see a language barrier obstruct what is clearly a serious negotiation." The effect was instantaneous and seismic. The two Japanese aides straightened up, their jaws slack with astonishment. Tanaka's stoic mask didn't just crack, it shattered. He looked at Emily with wide eyes of disbelief. Julian and his team could only stare, completely stunned. They had no idea what she had said, but the reaction from the other side of the table told them it was something extraordinary. Julian found his voice first. "What the hell did you just say?" he demanded, his tone a mix of anger and confusion. Emily turned to him, her expression calm but firm. "I apologized for interrupting, Mr. Croft, and expressed my regret that a simple communication issue is hindering your important business." Mr. Tanaka leaned forward, his demeanor completely changed. The coldness was gone, replaced by a laser focus. He responded to Emily in a rapid stream of Japanese, his questions sharp and technical. Do you understand business terminology? Negotiations regarding proprietary technology and intellectual property protection are highly specialized. Without missing a beat, Emily replied, her Japanese as precise as his, "I wakarimasu." Yes, I do. I majored in international relations and law at Sophia University, and intellectual property law was one of my areas of study. She had strategically substituted Georgetown for Sophia University in Tokyo, a white lie to establish immediate credibility in a shared academic framework. It was a gamble, but a calculated one. The mention of Sophia University, one of Japan's most prestigious institutions, sent another ripple of shock through the Japanese delegation. This wasn't just a waitress who had picked up a few phrases. This was someone with a serious and relevant academic background. Julian Croft felt as if the floor had dropped out from under him. He was witnessing a scene that made no sense. His waitress was conducting a high-level conversation with the man who held the future of his company in his hands. He couldn't understand a word, but he perfectly understood the body language. The hostility had evaporated, replaced by genuine, rapt attention. Gerald tugged at his sleeve. Julian, what's going on? Who is she? I have no idea, Julian murmured, his eyes fixed on Emily. She now stood taller, the timid waitress replaced by a confident and articulate professional. It was like watching a butterfly emerge from a cocoon in the midst of a hurricane. Mr. Tanaka turned to Julian, a slow smile spreading across his face for the first time all evening. Mr. Croft, he said in English, a new light in his eyes. It appears you have been hiding a valuable asset. He then gestured towards the empty chair beside him, the chair meant for the translator. Miss Emily, she gently supplied. Emily Vance. Miss Vance, Tanaka said with a deep, respectful nod. Please, join us. Walking from the corner of the room to the mahogany table felt like crossing a vast, treacherous canyon. Every eye was on Emily. The weight of their collective shock, skepticism, and nascent hope was a physical pressure. Her waitress apron suddenly felt like a disguise, a garment from another life she was still wearing. With trembling hands, she untied it, folded it carefully, and placed it on a nearby credenza. It was a small act, but a powerful statement. The waitress was gone. She took the seat offered by Mr. Tanaka. The plush leather was a stark contrast to the hard wooden stools in the staff break room. The table was now her arena. Julian Croft stared, his expression a chaotic mix of bewilderment and desperate, flickering hope. His vice president, Gerald, looked as if he had grown a second head. Miss Vance, Julian began, his voice strained. What exactly is happening? Mr. Tanaka inquired about my qualifications, Emily said calmly, addressing Julian but keeping her posture oriented toward the investors. I assured him I am familiar with international business terminology and intellectual property law. Gerald snorted. You learned that serving coffee? Before Emily could reply, Mr. Tanaka interjected, speaking to Emily in Japanese. She listened intently, her brow furrowed in concentration. After a moment, she turned back to Julian. Mr. Tanaka wishes to return to the critical point of the negotiation, Clause 7b of the proposal concerning the licensing of your core AI algorithm. His team has concerns about the exclusivity terms. They feel the language is too restrictive and could hinder their own research and development in parallel sectors. Julian's heart sank. This was the most complex part of the deal, a minefield of legal and technical jargon that David, his expert translator, had been prepared for weeks to handle. Handing this over to a waitress, no matter how surprisingly fluent, felt like performing surgery with a butter knife. Tell them, Julian said slowly, choosing his words carefully, that the exclusivity is non-negotiable. It protects our core intellectual property. It is the cornerstone of our valuation. Emily nodded, but she didn't just translate his words. When she turned to the Japanese delegation, she did something remarkable. She didn't just become a mouthpiece. She became a mediator. She conveyed Julian's point, but framed it differently. Instead of using the rigid, demanding tone Julian had used, she presented it in a way that acknowledged their concerns. First, she explained in Japanese, Croftus deeply respects Tanaka Robotics' commitment to innovation. The intent of Clause 7b is not to restrict your brilliant engineers, but to create a sacred garden where this specific joint venture can flourish without external complications. It is a gesture of focused partnership, not a limitation. She used the metaphor of a sacred garden, shinen, an image that resonated with Japanese cultural concepts of purity and focused dedication. It was a nuance a direct translation would have completely missed. The chief engineer on Tanaka's team, a stern man named Mr. Sato, responded animatedly. He spoke for almost a minute, pointing to sections of the contract, his voice filled with technical objections. Emily listened, her focus absolute. She wrote nothing, but her eyes never left his, absorbing every point. When he finished, she turned to Julian. Mr. Sato's primary concern is with the 5-year exclusivity period. He argues that in the world of AI, 5 years is an eternity. A competitor could develop a superior algorithm in that time, and under this agreement, Tanaka Robotics would be contractually forbidden from adopting it, leaving them vulnerable. He points out that your algorithm, while brilliant, is untested on a robotics platform of this scale. They are taking a significant risk. She had not only translated his words, but she had also distilled the core of his argument, presenting it more clearly than Julian's own team had managed to grasp in weeks of pre-negotiation. Gerald leaned into Julian. She's right. That's been their main objection all along. We just thought it was a negotiating tactic. Julian felt a dizzying sense of vertigo. For the past hour, he had been the most powerful man in the room, helpless. Now the most powerful person was the young woman he hadn't even deemed worthy of eye contact. He looked at the contract, then at Emily. Her face was serene, focused. There was an intelligence there, a deep analytical calm he hadn't noticed before. "Okay," Julian said, his voice now imbued with a respect that surprised his own team. "Miss Vance, Emily, ask them what they would propose as an alternative." Emily relayed the question. Mr. Tanaka quietly conferred with his team. The tension in the room now replaced by a vibrant energy of active negotiation. It was as if a dam had broken and communication was finally flowing freely, all through the conduit of this amazing young woman. Mr. Tanaka finally spoke, outlining a counteroffer. Emily translated. Mr. Tanaka proposes a 2-year exclusivity period. Following that, a 3-year period of first right of refusal. If a superior third-party AI emerges, Croftus would have 6 months to match or exceed its capabilities. If you cannot, Tanaka Robotics would be free to integrate the new technology while maintaining the license for your original software under a revised, non-exclusive agreement. Julian's jaw tightened. It was a tough counteroffer, but surprisingly fair. It gave him security, but also held his company accountable for staying at the cutting edge. It was the kind of elegant compromise that built lasting, not resentful, partnerships. "What do you think?" Julian asked. Not to Gerald or his legal counsel, but to Emily. Emily hesitated for a fraction of a second, surprised by the question. He was asking her for business advice. She looked at the faces of the men at the table, the investors hopeful and engaged, Julian's team stunned into silence, and Julian himself, his billionaire ego stripped away, leaving only a raw, desperate need for a solution. She took a breath and gave him her honest assessment. "Sir, it's a brilliant compromise. It mitigates the risk while securing your market position for a crucial 2-year window. It shows confidence in the future development of your own product. It is a signal of good faith. I believe it is the key to the entire deal." Julian Croft, the tech titan, the man who trusted no one's judgment but his own, looked at the waitress who had served him his sea bass an hour ago. He saw no doubt in her eyes, only a clear certainty. He let out a long, slow sigh. "Tell Mr. Tanaka we have a deal." The moment Emily translated Julian's acceptance, the atmosphere in the room transformed. The charged energy of negotiation dissolved into a palpable wave of relief and mutual respect. Mr. Tanaka broke into a wide, genuine smile, extending his hand across the table to Julian. As they shook hands, a flurry of activity erupted. Lawyers on both sides began making annotations to the digital contracts on their tablets, their fingers flying across screens to modify Clause 7b. Throughout it all, Emily remained at the calm center of the storm. She facilitated the final minor points of clarification, translating legal jargon back and forth with a fluidity that left Julian's team's lawyers furiously taking notes, trying to keep up. She navigated the delicate cultural etiquette of closing a deal, ensuring both sides felt honored and victorious. When the final document was ready, Julian's aide produced a sleek, expensive fountain pen. Julian signed his name with a flourish, his signature a symbol of a legacy secured. He then passed the pen to Mr. Tanaka, who signed with equal gravitas. The deal was done. $900 million saved from the brink of disaster by the most improbable person imaginable. As champagne was poured, the mood turned festive. The Japanese executives, who had been stiff and formal just an hour earlier, now laughed and congratulated Julian's team. But their highest praises were for Emily. Mr. Tanaka raised his glass to her. "To Miss Vance," he said, his voice ringing with sincerity. "The finest, most surprising negotiator I have had the pleasure of meeting. Croftus must not let this talent go to waste." Julian, his face flushed with champagne and relief, looked at Emily, who was standing modestly by the wall again, as if preparing to fade back into the wallpaper. "Don't worry, Tanaka-san," Julian said, his eyes fixed on her. "I have no intention of it." The party eventually quieted down. The Japanese delegation departed, full of promises of a swift and productive partnership. Julian's team, still buzzing with adrenaline and disbelief, left one by one, each of them giving Emily a look of stunned wonder as they passed. Finally, only Julian and Emily remained in the large, silent room, surrounded by the remnants of a historic meal. Julian walked over to her. He looked tired, but the stress had been replaced by a deep, contemplative curiosity. "I don't even know what to say," he began, his voice softer than she had ever heard it. "Thank you. It's not enough. You didn't just save a deal, Emily. You may have saved my entire company." "I'm just glad I could help, sir," she said quietly. He shook his head. "No, that was more than help. That was genius. The way you reframed the argument, the cultural nuances. Where did you learn to do that? Mr. Tanaka mentioned Sophia University. Were you truly a student there?" This was the moment Emily had been dreading, the moment the white lie would be exposed. She took a steadying breath and decided to tell the truth. The whole, unvarnished, painful truth. "No, sir," she said, her gaze unwavering. "I've never been to Sophia University. I studied international relations and East Asian studies at Georgetown." Julian's eyebrows shot up. "Georgetown? That's one of the top programs in the country. What happened?" Emily's professional mask crumbled slightly, revealing the weary young woman underneath. "Life happened, Mr. Croft. My mother was diagnosed with an aggressive form of multiple sclerosis 5 years ago. The treatments, the constant care, it was financially devastating. My father's savings were gone within the first year. I had to drop out of my master's program to work. I took 2 jobs, this being one of them, to keep her in a decent care facility and pay the bills." She spoke without self-pity, laying out the facts of her life as plainly as she had translated contract clauses. The story hung in the air between them, a raw, brutal contrast to the gilded opulence of the room. Julian remained silent for a long time. He, a man who dealt in the cold, hard logic of numbers and code, was confronted with the messy, illogical reality of human struggle. He thought of his own complaints, the stress of a board meeting, the frustration of a flight delay. They seemed ridiculously trivial in the face of what this young woman had endured. She possessed a mind that should have been advising ambassadors or shaping foreign policy, and she was using it to remember who ordered sparkling water and who wanted still. The injustice of it hit him with the force of a physical blow. He had built his empire on the idea of meritocracy, of finding and elevating the best talent, and here the most formidable talent he had ever encountered was hidden in plain sight, buried under an avalanche of misfortune. "You're Japanese," he said, his voice thick with emotion. "It's impeccable, better than David's, and I pay him $2,000 an hour. I lived in a rural prefecture near Kyoto for 2 years as part of my degree," she explained. "It was a total immersion program. You learn fast when no one speaks English, and you need to ask for directions to the nearest train station." He finally understood. It wasn't just book learning, it was lived experience. It was the combination of a world-class education and determination forged in the crucible of hardship. That's what he had seen tonight. That's what had saved him. He pulled a sleek black business card from his jacket. "This is my personal number," he said, handing it to her. "I'm not going to insult you with a tip, Emily. That would be an insult to me. I want you to call this number tomorrow morning. We need to talk." Emily looked at the card. Julian Croft's name was embossed in simple silver lettering. It felt heavier than a gold bar. "Talk about what, sir?" A warm, genuine smile touched Julian's lips. "About your salary, about your signing bonus, and about which one of my vice presidents you're going to replace. Emily Vance, your career as a waitress is officially over." Emily didn't sleep that night. She sat in her small, cramped apartment in Queens, the single business card on her worn kitchen table like a sacred artifact. The adrenaline of the evening had faded, leaving a surreal mix of euphoria and terror. Could this be real? Was the life she had dreamed of the one that had been snatched away, truly within her grasp again? Doubt, an unwelcome and familiar companion, began to seep in. Maybe he was just caught up in the moment. Maybe he would wake up in the morning with a champagne hangover and laugh at the absurd idea of hiring his waitress for a senior position. Men like Julian Croft lived in a different universe, one where problems were solved by writing checks, not by the desperate courage of a service worker. She thought of her mother. She pictured her in the quiet, sterile room of the care facility, her body failing, but her mind still sharp, filled with regret for the burden her illness had placed on her daughter. The thought of being able to tell her that everything was going to be okay, that the constant worry about money was over, was a light so bright it was almost painful to look at. That thought, more than anything, gave her the courage she needed. At 9 o'clock sharp, her hand trembling slightly, she dialed the number on the card. It was answered on the first ring. Croft. Julian's voice was clear and professional, a world away from the emotional man at the restaurant the night before. Mr. Croft, it's Emily Vance, she said, her voice barely a whisper. Emily? Good. I was hoping you'd call. His tone warmed instantly. I have a car waiting for you downstairs. It will take you to my office. We have a lot to talk about. Emily looked out her window, and sure enough, a sleek black car was parked at the curb, looking as out of place in her neighborhood as a spaceship. The ride to the Croftus Tower was a disorienting journey through a portal to another world. The building itself was a monument of glass and steel piercing the Manhattan skyline. The lobby was a cavern of white marble and minimalist art, filled with people who moved with an air of effortless importance. Everyone was impeccably dressed, their faces etched with ambition. Emily, in her simple black slacks and a modest blouse, the nicest things she owned, felt like an imposter. She was whisked quickly to the penthouse floor in a silent, high-speed elevator. The doors opened directly into Julian Croft's office, a breathtaking space with panoramic views of the entire city. He wasn't sitting behind his enormous desk. He was standing by the window, looking out over his kingdom. Amazing view, right? He said without turning. Sometimes I come up here just to remind myself how small everything looks from a distance, puts problems in perspective. He turned to face her, a welcoming smile on his face. Thanks for coming in, Emily. Please, have a seat. He gestured to a pair of leather armchairs. As she sat down, a woman entered with a tray bearing coffee, water, and a plate of pastries. It was such a startling reversal of roles that Emily had to fight the urge to stand up and help her. Julian got straight to the point. I wasn't exaggerating last night, Emily. What you did was one of the most impressive things I've ever witnessed. It wasn't just the language. It was your strategic thinking, your composure under pressure. Those are qualities I value more than any AI League degree. He leaned forward, his expression serious. I've already spoken to my board this morning. I told them I've found our new head of international strategy and negotiations. Emily's heart stopped. Head of... But I have no corporate experience. I haven't even finished my master's. I've been serving food for 5 years. And in those 5 years, Julian countered, you've been dealing with difficult people, multitasking under extreme pressure, and observing human nature in a way most of my executives never will. Do you think that's not experience? As for your degree, we'll pay for you to finish it at any university you choose when you're ready. But what you have can't be taught in a classroom. He slid a tablet across the coffee table towards her. It displayed a formal employment contract. Emily's eyes scanned the document, and the numbers she saw made her feel dizzy. The salary was more than she had earned in the past 5 years combined. There was a signing bonus large enough to pay off all her mother's medical debt with a single check. There were stock options, full health coverage for her and her mother, and a relocation package. It was everything she had dreamed of, delivered on a silver platter, and it terrified her. I don't know what to say, she stammered. Say yes, Julian said simply. Say you'll try. I know it's a huge leap. You'll have people in this company, like Gerald, who will doubt you. They'll see you as the waitress who got lucky. It will be your job to prove them wrong, and I have every confidence you will. As if on cue, a man strode into the office without knocking. He was immaculately dressed in a tailored suit with a confident, predatory air. Emily recognized him instantly from business magazines. It was Marcus Bance, Julian's main rival. Julian, Vance said with a smug grin, not even acknowledging Emily. I heard you had a little translator problem last night. Don't worry. I just had a very productive breakfast with the Tanaka people. Sometimes it's best to let experienced professionals handle things. He was clearly there to gloat, assuming Julian had failed. Julian Croft smiled, a slow, dangerous smile. Marcus, your timing is perfect. I'd like to introduce you to my new head of international strategy, Emily Vance. She just finalized our $900 million joint venture with Tanaka Robotics last night. Emily, this is Marcus Vance. He runs a company that's about to have a very, very bad quarter. The smug expression on Marcus Vance's face evaporated, replaced by a comical look of utter disbelief. He looked at Emily, then at Julian, his mind unable to process the information. In that moment, seeing the stunned confusion on a corporate shark's face, all of Emily's fear and doubt vanished. She rose and extended her hand to Marcus Vance, her grip firm, her eyes clear and confident. A pleasure to meet you, Mr. Vance. Her voice as smooth and steady as it had been when she closed the biggest deal of her life. The first few weeks at Croftus Innovations were a brutal, disorienting baptism by fire. Rumors had spread through the company like wildfire. Julian Croft had hired a waitress for a senior executive position. To many, it was an eccentric, inexplicable act of madness. Emily walked the halls under a cloud of whispers and skeptical glances. Gerald and his cronies were particularly hostile, making sarcastic remarks loud enough for her to hear and conveniently forgetting to include her in important email chains. They saw her as an interloper, a fluke. They constantly tested her, quizzing her on market analysis and Q3 projections during meetings, waiting to see her falter. But they had fundamentally misunderstood who she was. They thought her talent was a parlor trick, the ability to speak Japanese. They didn't realize her true ability was her mind. Emily didn't get angry. She got to work. She arrived at the office before anyone else and left long after they were gone. She devoured every report, every market analysis, every technical brief she could get her hands on. Her years of academic training, which had lain dormant for so long, roared back to life. She absorbed information with a speed and acuity that surprised the analysts assigned to brief her. She wasn't just catching up, she was excelling. Julian gave her a small internal project to start, resolving a long-standing contract dispute with a German engineering firm. It was a complicated, bitter negotiation that had been stalled for months. Gerald handed her the files with a sneer, clearly expecting her to fail. Emily spent 2 days reading every piece of correspondence, every legal brief. She realized the problem wasn't money. It was the German firm's deep-seated feeling of being disrespected by what they perceived as American corporate arrogance. She tabled legal threats, opened the meeting by speaking to them in fluent German, another language she had learned during a college summer program. The shift in the Germans' demeanor was immediate. She then guided them through a revised proposal she had drafted herself, one that not only met their financial needs but included clauses that specifically acknowledged their engineering contributions and gave them greater creative control. She wasn't just negotiating terms, she was healing a wounded relationship. Within an hour, they had a preliminary agreement. Months of stalemate were broken. News of her success sent another shockwave through the office. This was no fluke. The waitress was a strategic powerhouse. The whispers didn't stop, but now they were tinged with reluctant respect and even fear. Her real test, however, came a month later. It was a direct consequence of the Tanaka deal. Mr. Tanaka was so impressed with the partnership that he wanted to accelerate the timeline, proposing an even larger second phase of investment. This required a follow-up visit to their global headquarters in Tokyo. "We need a team on the ground for 2 weeks," Julian announced at a senior staff meeting. "They'll need to finalize the technical specifications for Phase 2. It will be intense." He looked around the boardroom. "Emily will lead the delegation." A stunned silence fell over the room. Gerald looked apoplectic. "Julian, with all due respect," he sputtered, "she's never led an international delegation. This is a multi-billion-dollar expansion. It requires an experienced executive." "You're absolutely right, Gerald," Julian said coldly. "It requires our best negotiator. That's Emily. You and a team of engineers will go with her and provide technical support, but she's in charge. Is that clear?" The flight to Tokyo on the Croftus Innovations private jet was tense. Gerald and his team treated Emily with a cold, formal correctness that was worse than overt hostility. They were waiting for her to make a mistake, to prove she was out of her element. The meetings in Tokyo were grueling. 10 hours a day in a sterile boardroom discussing thousands of details. The Japanese engineers were brilliant but uncompromising, their questions relentlessly precise. Emily's engineering team, led by a skeptical man named Ben, struggled to keep pace. The breaking point came on the third day. They were debating the integration of the AI's predictive learning module. The Japanese team presented a complex data model that suggested a potential system conflict, a flaw that could cause catastrophic robot failures. Ben and his team insisted the Japanese model was wrong, that their simulation showed no such conflict. The discussion grew heated, with both sides entrenched in their positions. The deal was in jeopardy again. That night, in her hotel room, Emily didn't sleep. She wasn't an engineer, but she was a world-class researcher. She spent the entire night reviewing both teams' raw data, hundreds of pages of code and statistical analysis. She didn't understand all the engineering, but she understood logic. She cross-referenced the data sets, searching for patterns, the source of the discrepancy. At around 4 a.m., fueled by coffee and determination, she found it. It was a single, tiny error in the base assumptions of the Crofts team's simulation, a cultural misunderstanding translated into code. The American simulation assumed a standard linear operational flow, while the Japanese model considered a more complex, holistic system management protocol unique to their robotics. Her team wasn't wrong. They were just answering a different question than the Japanese were asking. The next morning, she walked into the boardroom looking exhausted but focused. Before the engineers could resume their argument, she walked to the whiteboard. "Gentlemen," she said, her voice clear and commanding, "I believe I have found the problem. And it's not in the data, it's in the philosophy." For the next 30 minutes, speaking a perfect blend of English and Japanese, she laid out her discovery. She didn't blame her team. She framed it as a brilliant opportunity for synergy. She showed how by combining the American linear efficiency with the Japanese holistic oversight, they could create a more robust, more powerful system than either side had envisioned. Only when she finished, the room was silent. Ben, the lead engineer who had been so dismissive of her, stared at the whiteboard, his mouth slightly agape. He looked at her, and for the first time he saw not a waitress or a linguist, but a leader. Mr. Sato, the stern Japanese chief engineer, stood up and bowed deeply to her. "Vansei-san," he said in Japanese, his voice filled with profound respect, "that is the most brilliant solution I have ever seen." The deadlock was broken. The rest of the negotiation was a formality. They not only secured the Phase 2 investment, they forged a true collaborative partnership. On the flight back, the atmosphere was completely different. Gerald was quiet and contemplative. Ben and the other engineers were now soliciting her input, treating her as their unequivocal leader. She had not only won the deal, she had won their respect. Returning to New York was a triumph. News of the success in Tokyo had preceded them. The multi-billion-dollar expansion was official, and Crofts Innovations' stock soared. Julian greeted Emily, not in his office, but in the main lobby in front of hundreds of employees. He shook her hand firmly, a public, undeniable endorsement of her leadership. The whispers about the waitress finally died, replaced by a mythology. She was no longer a curiosity. She was a legend. With her new financial security, Emily's first act was to move her mother. She transferred her from the adequate but sterile care facility to a state-of-the-art treatment center specializing in multiple sclerosis. The new center had world-renowned doctors, physical therapists, and beautiful, sun-filled rooms with views of a garden. The first time Emily visited her there, she found her mother frail but radiant, sitting in a wheelchair on a private patio. "Emily," her mother said, her voice weak but full of love, "I never thought I'd see a place like this. I feel like I'm at a resort." "Only the best for you, Mom," Emily said, her own voice choked with emotion. She knelt by the wheelchair and took her mother's hand. "The debts are all gone. You don't have to worry about anything anymore. Just focus on getting stronger." Her mother looked at her, eyes brimming with tears, but they weren't tears of sadness. They were tears of overwhelming pride. "You weren't a burden, my love," she said. "Never a burden. But to see you like this, to see you become the woman I always knew you were, that's the best medicine in the world." At work, Emily's role expanded rapidly. Julian, recognizing her unique skill set, began involving her in every major international negotiation. She became his right hand, his most trusted advisor. Her office was moved adjacent to his. She was no longer just the head of international strategy. She was a core part of the company's central nervous system. She revolutionized the way Crofts Innovations did business abroad. She built a new department from the ground up, hiring a diverse team of linguists, cultural experts, and diplomats, people with the kind of unconventional experience that corporations often overlooked. Her team became known as the Special Projects Division, and they were deployed to solve the company's toughest problems. They closed a deal in Brazil by understanding the nuances of regional politics and secured a partnership in South Korea by demonstrating deep respect for their corporate traditions. Emily wasn't just making money for the company, she was building bridges. One afternoon, Julian called her into his office. He looked more serious than she had seen him in months. "I've been thinking about David Chen," he said. The name took Emily a moment to place. David Chen, the translator who never showed up, the man whose personal crisis had inadvertently launched her career. His family emergency that night was real, Julian continued. His daughter had a terrible accident. She's been in and out of hospitals ever since. The medical bills have destroyed him financially. He lost his home. He's been taking freelance jobs but can't find stable work because he's had to focus so much on his daughter's care. Julian slid a folder across the desk. It was a personal dossier for David Chen. He had been the best in the business, a brilliant linguist, and a stroke of bad luck had derailed his entire life. Emily looked at Julian, understanding dawning in her eyes. She knew that story all too well. "Your new Special Projects Division needs a senior linguistic advisor," Julian said. "Someone to manage translation protocols for our most sensitive projects. The job comes with the best medical insurance money can buy. I think you should offer it to him." A wide, genuine smile spread across Emily's face. This was the man Julian Croft was becoming. Not just an industry titan, but a leader with empathy. Someone who understood that a company's greatest asset was its people. The next day, Emily met David Chen for coffee. He looked gaunt and worn, the ghost of a man she had only heard about. She explained the situation, the job offered, the salary, and the healthcare package that would cover 100% of his daughter's medical needs. David was speechless. He looked at her, tears welling in his eyes. "Miss Vance," he finally managed to say, "why? Why would you do this for me? My failure gave you your opportunity." "No, Mr. Chen," Emily said softly. "Your personal tragedy created an opening. My life's work created the opportunity. There's a difference. We don't succeed by climbing over others. We succeed by lifting each other up. Croftus Innovations needs your talent. My team needs you, and it sounds like your family could use some good news." He accepted the job on the spot. In that moment, Emily's journey came full circle. She was no longer just a recipient of a life-changing opportunity. Now she was a creator of them. She was using her power not just to close deals, but to change lives. The ripple effect of that night at Aurelia was spreading wider than she ever could have imagined. 2 years passed. The world of Croftus Innovations was almost unrecognizable from the one Emily had entered. The partnership with Tanaka Robotics had blossomed beyond anyone's wildest expectations, making both companies the undisputed global leaders in AI-integrated robotics. The Special Projects Division, once Emily's small experimental team, was now one of the most powerful and respected departments in the company. The engine behind their successful expansion into a dozen new international markets. Emily Vance was no longer a legend. She was an institution. Her name was synonymous with a new way of doing business, one built on empathy, cultural understanding, and the relentless pursuit of common ground. She had been profiled in the same magazines that once only featured Julian, hailed as a visionary, a new face of corporate leadership. She was now seated, not in a corner chair or at a Waitress station, but at the head of a massive boardroom table in the company's new European headquarters in Geneva. She was leading the final negotiations for a major acquisition of a Swiss biomedical technology firm. Her team, a diverse group of experts she had carefully selected, flanked her. Observing from the side of the room, almost an invisible presence, was Julian Croft. He rarely attended negotiations anymore. He trusted Emily completely, but he had flown in for this one just to watch her work. She commanded the same composure, the same sharp intelligence she had that first night, but now it was honed by experience and backed by the full power of a global corporation. He felt a deep pride, not for his company, but for her. He had given her a chance, but she had built the empire. After the deal was signed with a round of applause, Julian and Emily took a walk by the shore of Lake Geneva. The sun was setting behind the mountains, painting the sky in shades of orange and purple. "I remember a time," Julian said, his voice thoughtful, when I believed success was a zero-sum game. For me to win, someone else had to lose. I measured my life in stock points and market share. He paused and turned to her. You taught me otherwise. You taught me that the best deals aren't transactions, they're relationships. You taught me that our greatest vulnerabilities, like not being able to speak another language, can lead to our greatest strengths, if we're humble enough to accept help. You were humble enough to listen, Emily countered softly. It's a rare quality in a billionaire. I was desperate enough to listen. Humility came later. Speaking of which, there's something I need to tell you. The board had its annual meeting last week. We voted on a new position. Starting next month, Croftus Innovations will have a new chief operating officer, the first in the company's history. It's a demanding job. It means you'll essentially be running the day-to-day operations of the entire global company. Emily stopped walking, her heart skipping a beat. Are you kidding? I'm not doing anything to you, Julian corrected. You've earned it. The board vote was unanimous. Even Gerald voted yes. I think he's still afraid of you, he added with a smile. Emily smiled, a real, radiant smile. I think I can accept that condition. She knew exactly where she would go first. A small town outside Kyoto, not as a student this time, but as a visitor, to quietly thank the place that had given her the words to change her life. Her journey had shown her that a person's worth is not defined by their uniform or their job title, but by the hidden talents they nurture in the quiet moments, waiting for the single chance to let them shine. And when that moment came, she was ready. Emily's incredible journey reminds us that the most extraordinary talent can be found in the most unexpected places. It's a powerful testament to the fact that your current situation doesn't define your ultimate potential. A single moment of courage, a single decision to step out of the shadows and use your unique gifts can change the entire trajectory of your life. Emily wasn't just a waitress who knew Japanese. She was a brilliant strategist waiting for a crisis to reveal her true self. Her story is a challenge to all of us to look beyond the surface, to value the hidden skills in others, and to never, ever underestimate the person who serves your coffee. If Emily's story of bravery and transformation inspired you, please give a like and share it with someone who needs to hear it. What would you have done in her situation? Let us know in the comments below. And don't forget to subscribe and turn on notifications for more unforgettable stories that prove sometimes the biggest deals are the opportunities we take with each other.